And then the last election. Whoo, we made it all the way to the end. We have one more special proposition to talk about after this. But the last election is Justice of the Peace for Precinct 1, Place 1. And that race is between the independent candidate, not Republican Party. Republican Party did not put anybody up for this position. The independent candidate, George Milhouse Jr., and the Democratic Party candidate, Naomi Doyle. This one I have a little bit more detail on, and I like Doyle. Doyle is cool. I would look up, like, Channel 12 has some good footage from the press club, the recent press club meeting that happened, where all of these different candidates got to talk about their platforms. And Milhouse talked and Doyle talked. Milhouse is a cop. And sometimes being a cop doesn't translate directly into being a good judge. But he has 30 years of dedicated service to Jefferson County. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means he's been a cop for 30 years, but he's a cop with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. He serves currently with the Jefferson as a criminal court bailiff for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department at the Jefferson County Courthouse. So, like, he's around the court. He's seen the court happen. Sometimes that doesn't translate into being a good judge. On the other hand, Naomi Doyle has experience as a justice of the peace. She was elected to be the justice of the peace for Precinct 1, Place 1 in 2020. She worked as a legislative assistant in the Texas House of Representatives. She formerly served as elections manager for Jefferson County. And so she just has like more, she has like a degree in law. And so she has more legal background to being a judge than more like law enforcement background to being a judge. But I like Doyle. This ruling that she made in this Calvin Walker case is frustrating to me. So we're going to talk about Calvin Walker. If you were not aware, Calvin Walker is a tremendously famous, notorious person in Beaumont because he stole over $1 million from BISD. It's crazy. Calvin Walker's a crazy person. He still has not paid back one penny of that $1 million that he stole from BISD. And Calvin Walker was recently in Naomi Doyle's court. In January of 2020, Calvin Walker was convicted of securing execution of a document by deception after he submitted falsified invoices and fraudulently applied check receipts to collect roughly $1,172,656 from BISD, overcharging them for electrical work that he performed. He has an electrical company and did work for BISD and overcharged them exorbitantly on everything that he did for them, and therefore like stole more than $1 million from BISD. That happened. He was convicted of that in 2020. It was like happening in like 2014. He like stole a crazy amount from BISD, is very famous in the community for having stolen all that money from BISD. He has continued to this day to appeal the ruling that convicted him, unsuccessfully, kind of. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But in the meantime, in October 2022, Charles Paul filed a lawsuit against Walker, claiming that Walker did subpar electrical work for him and then he had overpaid for the job. Why people are still hiring Calvin Walker to do electrical work for them, I don't know. I guess this Charles Paul guy didn't know who Calvin Walker was or didn't know about Calvin Walker's background. But he hired Calvin Walker to do electrical work for him and says that Calvin Walker did subpar electrical work and overcharged him. That sounds familiar. Paul sought to recoup $2,700 of the $7,700 he had already paid Walker in overpaid funds for what he described as poor quality work at an inflated rate. That sounds real familiar. It sounds like Calvin Walker's still up to his old tricks. This is a lawsuit that Charles Paul filed against Calvin Walker in Naomi Doyle's court. Walker countersued Paul, claiming that Paul was attempting to steal money from him through his lawsuit. He requested an additional $5,000 in damages. Paul has already paid Calvin Walker $7,700 for the work that Calvin Walker did for him. Calvin Walker countersues him for $5,000, arguing that he was still owed $2,300 because Walker quoted to Paul $8,500 for the job, but Paul only paid him $7,700. Argues that Paul still owes him $2,300 and that the $2,700 that Paul was trying to recoup from Walker, that Paul sought, was part of a frivolous lawsuit. How that makes Calvin Walker entitled to it, I don't understand. But Calvin Walker has done this math and decided that actually Paul wants $2,700 from him. Actually, Paul owes $5,000 to Calvin Walker. Then, in the midst of this court case, Calvin Walker's in Washington, D.C. in November of 2022, in front of the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Walker swore an oath of indigence in front of the Supreme Court that he could not pay more than $1 million in restitution to BISD because his sole income was disability payments that weren't even enough to cover his monthly expenses, much less pay back BISD. What are you talking about, man? You just did this job that Charles Paul is suing you for and got at least $7,700 from him. Certainly that's not the only job that Calvin Walker has had in the last 2 years. What do you mean your only source of income is disability payments? How could that possibly be true? So in March of 2023, Naomi Doyle, getting back to why this is relevant, ruled that Charles Paul had to pay Calvin Walker $5,000 in damages. The $5,000 in damages Walker requested in his countersuit. How somebody... I can't imagine how she doesn't know that Calvin Walker has the BISD stuff in his history. I can't imagine that she doesn't know that Calvin Walker is in front of the Supreme Court arguing that he has no income while he's telling her in her court that Charles Paul paid him $7,700 and should pay him $5,000 more. I don't know how she can't know those things. And if she doesn't, she should. And it feels crazy to rule with Calvin Walker in this case. So, I mean, like, I like Doyle. I think, like, on paper, I like Doyle more than Milhouse. But I don't know. That Calvin Walker case is kind of crazy. The fact that she's been Justice of the Peace for a while now gives us the benefit of being able to see her judicial record. And that's in her judicial record. That feels crazy to me. But I don't know. Maybe legally the decision was justified. Maybe she knows what she's doing. Like I said, I would prefer a candidate for this position that has more of a legal background than a law enforcement background. But those are the two candidates for Justice of the Peace.